1941, the height of World War II. Japan launches an attack on the U.S. naval base at Pearl Harbor. This day makes it clear Japan becomes a direct enemy of the United States of America. A few years later, in 1944, amid fierce fighting in the Pacific, Japan sends its soldiers to the Philippines, to Lubang Island, to resist the advancing American forces. Among these soldiers was a second lieutenant in the Japanese army, Hiroo Onoda, the hero of today's story. Before their departure, the soldiers receive an order from the Army Chief of Staff, Lieutenant General Akira Muto. The order states, "Suicide is strictly forbidden. Hold out for 3 to 5 years. We will definitely come back for you. Continue the fight as long as even one soldier remains alive, even if you must survive on palm fruits. I repeat, suicide is strictly forbidden." Upon arriving on Lubang, Onoda proposes that the Japanese Island Command begin preparations for a prolonged defense. However, his suggestions are ignored. As a result, American forces overrun the Japanese garrison with little difficulty. The young intelligence officer, Hiroo Onoda, together with his unit, is forced to retreat into the mountains. There, in the jungle, he sets up a secret base and begins waging a guerrilla war behind enemy lines. Fighting alongside Onoda are his subordinates, Private First Class Yuichi Akatsu, Senior Private Kinshichi Kozuka, and Corporal Shoichi Shimada. Each of them is armed with an Arisaka rifle, several hand grenades, and together they carry about 1,500 rounds of ammunition. Onoda's unit raids small Filipino villages to obtain food and essential supplies. During these attacks, the soldiers repeatedly engage in firefights with the Philippine police. In the course of these clashes, Onoda loses several of his comrades. On September 2, 1945, Japan officially signs the Instrument of Surrender. However, Onoda, having no contact with the outside world, remains unaware that the war has ended. He continues to fight, not realizing that he is no longer fighting the Americans, but the Philippine police. Soon, American leaflets fall into Onoda's hands, announcing the end of the war. But Onoda dismisses them as enemy propaganda and continues the struggle, believing that Lubang Island will one day return to Japanese control. Despite the desperate situation, the young officer remained loyal to his oath and continued to wage a guerrilla war, believing he was fighting against the Americans. The war had long been over, and the Filipino people were trying to live peaceful lives. However, sudden attacks from the jungle became intolerable, and the Filipinos allowed the Japanese to organize a search operation to bring the long-lost soldiers back home. The search yielded no results, and the Japanese authorities eventually declared Hiroo Onoda dead. Years passed, yet the local residents of the Philippines were convinced that the Japanese soldier was still alive and hiding in the jungle. On February 20th, 1974, a young Japanese traveler and student, Norio Suzuki, found Onoda in the jungles of Lubang. Suzuki had arrived on the island only 4 days earlier, determined to find him. Onoda had been watching him from the bushes and seeing that he was alone and unarmed, decided to confront him after Suzuki unknowingly set up his tent near Onoda's hidden food cache. Suzuki tried to persuade him to return home, telling him about the end of the war, Japan's defeat, and the country's post-war prosperity. However, Onoda refused, explaining that he could not leave his post without a direct order from his commanding officer. Suzuki returned to Japan alone but brought back photographs of the Japanese intelligence officer, which caused a media sensation. The Japanese government urgently contacted Yoshimi Taniguchi, a former major of the Imperial Japanese Army and Onoda's direct commander, who after the war had been working in a bookstore. On March 9, 1974, Taniguchi flew to Lubang, met Onoda while dressed in military uniform, and officially ordered him to surrender. Only then did Onoda finally lay down his arms. Upon learning that Japan had indeed surrendered in 1945, he broke down in tears. He was wearing tattered military uniform but still carried a functioning Arisaka rifle. By that time, Onoda had carried out more than 100 attacks, killing 30 people and wounding hundreds in clashes with Filipino civilians and authorities. After the intervention of the Japanese government, the Philippines granted Onoda a pardon. Hiroo Onoda returned to Japan on March 12, 1974. He died in Tokyo on January 16, 2014, just 2 months short of his 92nd birthday.